Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to show you my process for creating a fabric yo-yo. Now, some companies make these little gadgets, these little plastic templates, to aid you in the process of making these fabric yo-yos, and they're wonderful. But there are some times when you don't have access to that, or you just want to create one in your own size. I'll give you some tips that I use in terms of how to judge the size finished yo-yo that you want to create and where to start from that, as well as the depth of the yo-yo. I also show you my process using an iron to create those even edges, those nice crisp seams on the yo-yo that you don't really see until you start to see it, and you notice it on other yo-yos when it hasn't been done. So I'll show you my process that way. Now, fabric yo-yos are very popular in the United States, and in the South they used to make them into blankets, and this way they were airy and they were comfortable and also handmade. They were used with leftover fabric scraps, and I just think that's wonderful. It's kind of a take on quilting, the frugalness of that. So I think that's beautiful. And with all the fabric that's available today, you can really tailor your yo-yos to be something spectacular. Now, they're also called suffolk puffs, which I think is an elegant terminology. And so it really goes the extreme from frugality to elegance when using your fabric yo-yos. Today's video is strictly about creating the yo-yo, and I'll do future videos using those templates to show you that technique, show you shaped yo-yos, and also how I use them or how they can be used in different projects. But for today, here's my process for making the humble and simple yo-yo. So now to make fabric yo-yos, you start with a circle, and this will give you the circular shape when you're finished. But I want to show you the different sizes that you get. When you start from this size circle, you end up with a fabric yo-yo approximately this size. Now, I'm just using the cap to a candle just because I love that shape and size. It makes an easy way for me to make a template, and that's what I'm going to use when I show you later in the video how I do it. The finished yo-yo is approximately half the size of the diameter of the circle that you create to start it. Now, they make these little contraptions which are very handy. You put your fabric in here, and I'll detail it in another video. It's just making the circle, but it holds the fabric, and then you just stitch through the appropriate parts. But as you can see, the finished product is about half the size of that circle. Here I just use this pin cushion because it gives me a nice round circle in the size that I want. So keep in mind that the size that you create will be considerably smaller than the initial circle that you start out with. This one is about 4.5 inches, and so my finished rosette or suffolk puff or yo-yo is about 2.25 inches or so, and it goes down considerably. The larger the circle, the larger proportion-wise your yo-yo will be. So by that I mean it'll be closer to half of what you start with. And if you start very small, your yo-yo is even smaller than half. Ends up to be about a third, somewhere between a third and a half. So it exponentially gets larger as your size gets larger. If you have a specific size you want to use, you'll have to calculate that specifically, but keep in mind the general rule is in half. So if you start with a 4-inch circle, you get an approximately 2-inch circle. Now, there are different variations on sewing your yo-yo, and I think that's kind of important to mention. I'll just do it quickly. No matter what size yo-yo you make, there'll be a depth this way in your yo-yo, and as you can see here, I have 2 yo-yos, and this one's considerably deeper. I didn't fold the edge of my top piece, so this is just the raw seam, and I stitched it in a way that gave me that height. So if that's something you want or something you don't want, I'll show you some tricks on how to do that when we're stitching our actual yo-yo. You can make it with a finished edge, as you see here and here, here and here, and here and here, or you can use the raw edge, and I have the raw edge here and here. You can just see the raw of the fabric. It starts to fray. One other thing I wanted to mention is the smaller you make your yo-yo, the more difficult it is to really shape it. This one I sewed up very tightly. It's not even perfectly round. This one's another small one. It came out a lot rounder, and I could still play with it to get that a little more rounded. As you get larger, your fabric has more give and more play to it, so you can get that shape. And lastly, not only can you stack yo-yos on top of each other for different ideas, but you can use this side of the yo-yo or the back as well. So there's lots of things you can do with it. For this one, because I intended to use the back, I kind of centered it around what I wanted to show with that fabric piece. So now to create the yo-yo, I'm going to create one very similar to this piece here. This is the finished size, and this is the circle that I use to trace onto my fabric. Now when I make yo-yos, I like to trace onto 2 layers of fabric. So I have this beautiful fabric here, and I like to trace onto the 2 layers and then cut 2 layers. Because I like to use cotton fabric, the 2 layers give me a little stiffness, a little tension for when I'm cutting, and so I find that very helpful. And yo-yos, because they're such a great little shape and a little thing I can use for my sewing, I like to have additional pieces ready to be made. So that's why I cut 2 at a time. You don't have to do that. You can cut just as many or as few as you want. So I go around and I trace that circle. And I want to try and trace it fairly well. This is an erasable pen, and the heat of an iron will erase it, but I don't need an erasable pen. This is just what I use for sewing. I could use any type of pen. Now that I have my circle traced, I want to come over here and cut it out. So I cut my fabric, and then using both layers, I'm just going to very carefully cut this circle. I'm going to stick right to the edge. And I find it helpful to just gently move the fabric around in that circular formation and taking little bites of it with my scissors. It doesn't have to be a perfect circle, but the more precise it is, the better shape you'll have as an end result. And I can just trim off that little piece here. So now I have both circles. Now this is the process that I like to use. You don't need to use an iron, but I do feel that it gives a better result and it makes for easier sewing. So the first thing I like to do is just iron my pieces flat if they're not completely flat ahead of time. And I just iron both sides. I'll set one of these aside since I'm not going to use it. And now I'm just going to eyeball an approximate border around this circle. I just want to create a little seam. So I'm just going to fold it in a very small amount, maybe 1/4 of an inch. And I start to fold it in a little bit and I press that seam. But I leave part of it up. Because this is a circular shape, I want to skip ahead a little ways and press down. So I have a little bit of a line here, and then I'm just going to press that area in between it. And I do the same thing. I press down, leaving this little edge up. I like to rotate my fabric, and then I press this down again. And I'm going to go all the way around this circle, just eyeballing the distance that I have, pressing down the edge, and keeping some of the edge up as I go. Now I do this because I find it helps me make a better result at the end. I don't want to spend the time sewing these yo-yos only to have them wonky or so that I can't use them. I don't want to waste my time and my supplies to do this. I think they're beautiful and they make nice little objects you can use on your projects. I'm sewing a number of them because I want to make a yo-yo quilt, but that takes hundreds of them, so that might be a project a few years in the making. So I just press them all around like this, continuing to press the edge of my fabric. It's okay if some areas are a little bit thicker than others, particularly with this wide piece of this wide circle here. The smaller circles you have to be even more precise. But this 4-inch circle will give me a 2-inch yo-yo, and that's a good size for my quilt or for most of my projects, and I can modify it further. So I have my yo-yo with all the edges pressed around, And then I just like to give it another pressing. And some time when I have time, I'll do a bunch of these at a time, maybe a half dozen or so. And then I'll just keep a pile of them ready to be sewn, just like this. So the next stage is to sew them. So now to sew my yo-yo, I have thread here, and I just want to choose strong thread. Some people like to have double thread here, where they fold the thread right through the needle and they knot it here, so you'll have two pieces. I'm using pearl cotton here. I don't need to do that. But if you'd like to do that, or if you like that extra durability, go right ahead. So what I do is I have the good side, the front side of my fabric, facing down, and I'll come anywhere on this folded edge, and I'll bring my needle up through that folded edge. Now the lower I bring my needle up on the edge, the closer to the center of the circle, I'll get more of that height on that puff. Because I want it to be fairly flat for most of these, I'm going to go right to the top, maybe within 1/8 of an inch of the top of this circle on that seam, and I come in from the bottom. So if I want it to have more of a height, I'll go lower, but I want it to be fairly close to the top. And then I'm just going to stick my needle in, and you can even do straight stitches. So now if you keep your stitches small and tight together, the hole will be small and tight. If you separate your stitches, you'll have a larger hole here, which can be useful if you want to put a bead or a pearl or something in there. So it really depends on what you're going for. If you don't really care one way or the other, or you're not sure how you can use it, I'd suggest going with the small stitches just so that you have a lot of options. But it's completely up to you. There's no wrong way to sew a fabric yo-yo. So now I've made my first stitch, starting my second stitch. And depending on my mood, I can either just do these long straight stitches, or I can come in with a longer needle like I have and just do a running stitch where I bend the fabric around the needle in a set distance. And this really depends on my mood most of all. Sometimes I really enjoy the process of the straight stitches. It's very rewarding to pull that thread through the fabric. So I'll continue to do this all the way around this piece. I've seen some people do it so quickly that even a 4-inch circle, they have that running stitch all the way around in just seconds. I'm not that quick. So I continue to go all the way around the circle, keeping my stitches at the top of that circle as opposed to the bottom. Now sometimes when I pull my thread, I'll pull this and it will kind of round up, and that is totally fine. It doesn't have to stay flat. The more tension you have, the tighter it will round up, and too tight might be challenging for your stitches. So just go with whatever works for you. I like to do a bunch of stitches first and then pull my needle through. And I just keep it loose. But as you can see, it's starting to cup the fabric as I go. It's starting to really pull it together. I'll continue all the way around. Just halfway to go. Again, making those stitches. I want to make sure, since I'm using just one layer of thread, that I pull them out so that both layers aren't stuck in my stitching. And I just want to continue all the way around, making sure that my fabric seam here at the edge is folded. And I just do this by picking up my hand and moving it around the edge of this circle. When I get very close to where I started from, I want to make sure that my thread and my needle come up into the center of this circle. Because I started it in the center, I want it to end in the center. If I started it outside, I'd want it to end outside of the circle. But because I want the thread to be somewhat hidden, I'm just going to make small stitches and then come up in the center of my piece. Keeping the needle intact, still on the thread. And the first thing I like to do is just round out my circle here. And this just creates a lot of even tension. And then I can just pull it around as it goes. After I have that done, I can then hold the area where my thread goes into my circle and just gently pull it. And then I just loosen it up around and continue to pull it and loosen it until I get a nice even tension and everything is pulled into a little almost purse, a little sack here. And then when I have it all done, I'll keep playing around with it. If it's wonky over here and I can't get my finger in to straighten it out, or I can't pull it with the fabric, I can loosen the tension again. But I'll just keep playing with it. It takes just a little bit of time, not too long. I want to make sure it's nice and rounded, just as it is. And then I just pull it a little securely. I'll take my needle again, and I'll try and find the area where I came up. I want to go in through those ruffles that I stitched, just through a couple of them. And I'm going to pull my thread through them. This strengthens the thread and the bond here. I can do this a couple more times, just going through a couple more ruffles of the fabric. And again, I pull afterwards each time. Once I'm confident that it's nice and secure, I'm going to go into the fabric, into that hole, and just come out through the fabric again. When I make a little loop, I'll knot it. Again, holding it nice and taut. I can knot it a second time. And if I'm using this for a quilt, where it's an actual functional piece, I want to make sure I have an abundance of knots to really secure it down. Once it's secure, I'll clip that thread, and then I'll just take another moment and just make sure my yo-yo is nice and rounded. Just like this. I can flip it over, and I'm quite happy with how that looks. So that's my process for making a fabric yo-yo without using the pre-made gadget, with just using any size circle, my threads, and some fabric. In an upcoming video, I'll show you how you can use that little gadget to make your yo-yos, and we'll go through some videos with ideas to use your yo-yos in your work. So I hope you found this video helpful. This is my process for creating a fabric yo-yo, and it works for me because those are the sizes that I like to use and the materials that I have on hand that I can use to create that yo-yo. If you have different techniques that you like, be sure to mention it in the comments below. Thanks for joining me today.